Alongside Rory Boylan, I'm Nick Alberga for another edition of Sportsnet's NHL Power Rankings. And today, Rory, we start at number 10, the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, you know what? And I could feel they maybe earn being another spot or two higher because they're on a bit of a heater here, and they've certainly handled Vegas in the last number of times that they've faced them. That could be an interesting playoff series if it comes to that. But the Minnesota Wild, there's just a lot of teams above them here that I had a tough time grappling with. Honestly, this week I found it really difficult to rank the teams from 4 on down through 10, and even the first 1 or 2 teams off the list. But Minnesota is right in the mix of this. They could be any one of those teams. Discussing them this week, I kind of just wanted to draw attention to this Calder Trophy race that we're talking about.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
To me, my guy is still Kirill Kaprizov, and it's not a knock on Jason Robertson at all. I don't think Robertson is only putting up the points he is because of his placement at the top of the depth chart in Dallas there. But to me, Kaprizov is still the guy because he looks and feels more like the independent driver. He has single-handedly changed the fortunes and perception of an entire franchise. And he's not Sidney Crosby, but boy, does he have shades of Sidney Crosby, the way he uses his edges around the net to create scoring opportunities and get goals for himself. He's a really special player, and I just do not buy or understand this argument to not give him votes because he's 24 and spent the years he did in the KHL. That is not a rule. That should not be taken into consideration. So just everything and how special he is as a player, to me, he still has the inside track on that Calder discussion.
Yeah, the guy's Artemi Panarin 2.0. He's 48. He's going to win the Calder Trophy. But I can't discredit, what you just said. I totally agree. I'm actually the one who started Jason Robertson for Calder. I love what he's doing this season. But I think when push comes to shove, I just don't know if it's going to be enough. And Kirill Kaprizov has been outstanding for the Minnesota Wild. To number 9 we go. Everyone's favorite team, the New York Islanders.
Honestly, I usually like having them higher than this, but I found it really difficult with them this week because of the 2 losses that they had to Boston recently, the narrow shootout loss they had there to Washington on Thursday. So I don't see how you can rank them in this dynamic ranking above those 2 division rivals at this point in time. No real concern on this team still. It's all about the structure and the process and everything. But since they traded for Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac, they've scored 14 goals in 8 games. 6 of those goals came in 1 game against the New York Rangers. So they're 4-3-1 since that trade. Offense is always like, do they have enough of it or don't they have enough of it? And you certainly hope that Palmieri at least would help get that started a little bit. Hasn't happened yet. He's only scored once. So something to at least watch around the Islanders.
Yeah, I totally agree. Once again, it's weird how in agreement we are this week, but they have structure, and that could win in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But again, ultimately, it's going to come around offense. Do they have enough is the big-time question. Next up, this team certainly has enough, even with the injuries, and Spencer Knight making his debut this past week for the Florida Panthers, Rory.
Yeah, good start for him. Interesting dynamic in net with the 3 of them there. I don't think Knight is going to be a factor in the playoffs barring injury, but certainly a good start for him. You never know, for sure. But I've been seeing you tweet a lot, Nick, about Bill Zito being GM of the year here. I know. You're really good at it. You're pulling the audience. But how about Joe Quenneville for Coach of the Year? Honestly, I don't know how he's not running away with it at this point. Maybe the best defensive improved team year over year. That was their Achilles heel last year. They could score a lot, but that's really all they could do. This year, they've gone from 25th in high danger chances at 5-on-5 per game to 5th in the league, 21st in shots against per game in the league to 15th. So that's helped the goalies. Bobrovsky hasn't been awesome, but he's been better. Drieger has been awesome. Knight got off to the good start that we've been talking about. So unless, Rod Brind'Amour is getting some votes because we probably should have won this award last year, and sometimes that factors into this dynamic. And the Carolina Hurricanes are having an awesome season, no doubt. He's getting help from some goalie performances there. Unless some votes are going to him because of that, I don't know what the argument is against Quenneville winning this award. That's why they brought him in. He's getting these results. He's improving this team over year. And then to your point, Zito has done an awesome job adding to this group, making them harder to play against with the acquisitions of guys like Hornqvist and Bennett. That's going to set them up to be better in the playoffs. But we have to draw some attention to how Quenneville has coached this team to such a massive defensive improvement.
Can't dispute that. And again, Aaron Ekblad done for the season. Brandon Montour was a really, really good addition. And how about Sam Bennett, his start with the Florida Panthers, which leads us to number 7, the Washington Capitals.
Yeah, the Capitals are interesting to me. They're overcoming a bit of a stretch here where the goalies haven't been as good as they were at the start, maybe, and that kind of speaks to the other strengths that they have. Their defense has been okay, kind of middle of the pack in the league, but this team is going to be driven by its offense. And now you have Anthony Mantha coming in, and he's got off to a great start with the team. But the Capitals have been, they've been at or near the top of the league in shooting percentage from start to finish, and that's helped them get through this stretch where the goalies haven't been bad, but they haven't been great. They've been kind of average around there. And I wanted to take this opportunity to just shine a light on another amazing goal-scoring season for Alex Ovechkin, on track for what would have been over 40 goals, which I feel is kind of flying under the radar in this weird year where, at least around these parts, we're really focusing on the North Division. Austin Matthews is kind of running away with that, but shine a light on Ovechkin, and then just age-defying season that he's having. 2 more goals and he'll surpass Dion, move into the top 5 in the all-time list in goal scoring. By the time next year is done, it's probably only going to be Gordie Howe between him and Wayne Gretzky on the all-time list. So, I mean, we'll see where he goes. He's got the contract hanging over everything. I can't imagine that doesn't get done. But just, there are no more words to describe this guy, and he continues to do it. So just needed to shine some light on that.
I like that, and you can't sleep on contract here, Alex Ovechkin. Does he sign in Buffalo? Don't really answer that. We move on to number 6. A team that's sort of snoozing right now, but I still fully believe in them, the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah, Victor Hedman's not quite been himself for the last few weeks, maybe upwards of a month, and he's talked about that recently. You wonder, how that factors into his Norris candidacy at the end of the season. They've split a couple series recently with the 2 teams they're fighting with at the top of that division in Florida and Carolina, so they're not running away with things as we expected. But I'm ranking them here and not too much further down because I don't want to lose sight of the fact that this team is still pretty flawless, right? They're top 10 in shots for, shots against, goals for, goals against, power play, penalty kill. I mean, there's just not a weakness here. The road out of that division is going to be really interesting and could get really difficult, especially if the Dallas Stars find a way into that 4th spot and suddenly finishing first in the division isn't such an automatic way out of the first round. Dallas could present something really challenging. But this Tampa Bay team, wherever they finish, is still going to be the favorite. They're still probably going to be a lot of people's cup favorite, deservedly so. I think Hedman finds his way back to. It's just a little bit. This is the Lightning kind of at their worst, right? And they're still one of the top teams in the league.
Very competitive still. I love this. You bring the analytics, I bring the eye test, Rory. To number 5, tell me what you see about the goaltending in Toronto right now.
Yeah, it's shaky. It's definitely shaky at the moment. I don't want to overreact too much to that 5-game winless streak that they were on, even though overreacting to the Leafs is kind of required when you talk about them, it seems.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, it's, but the only reason they went 5 games without a win was because of the goaltending, either because their side was kind of shoddy or they ran into a hot guy. Braden Holtby was just outstanding in that first game back for the Vancouver Canucks. But since last Tuesday, they've been 1-2-2, but they generated 56.6% of the 5-on-5 scoring chances, so they've been controlling all these games. That's not been a problem. Their expected goals during that stretch, one of the best in the league. And they were banged up a little too. So now you're getting Nick Foligno into the lineup. Zach Hyman is going to be out for a few weeks, possibly the rest of the regular season. We'll see. You're going to get Freddie Anderson back maybe at some point by the time the regular season ends. Certainly in the playoffs, it sounds like he's going to be back. That should all settle things. And Thursday's win against Winnipeg, when it was the goalie on the other side who was not playing up to task, then you kind of start to feel better maybe about the Maple Leafs, even though they weren't carrying the play as much in that game as they had been in the others. But this just feels like a team that actually is playing pretty well and deserved a few more wins than they've been getting recently.
Well, speaking of the Toronto Maple Leafs, checking in at number 4, their arch nemesis, and they sort of came out of nowhere. It was like John Travolta, the Boston Bruins are like a couple points as we speak out of first in the East Division, right?
Yeah, so here you go. This is the team you've been getting on me for not having this top 10 for a while, and they have earned it now. They deserve to get here. Getting Tuukka Rask back has been huge. .955 save percentage in a shutout in the 3 games since he's returned. And when he's not been in, Jeremy Swayman, I mean, what a solid backup he's been to kind of help steady things too. But certainly a key to this hot streak here has been Taylor Hall has come in, scored 2 goals, which matches his full season total with the Buffalo Sabres. They were both insurance markers in wins. He brings that secondary scoring that this team was so sorely lacking. So if that is something that they can now start relying on, and now you've got Rask back, suddenly the Bruins are back to what they thought they were going to be all season. They might come out of this first place in the division because they have 2 games in hand of everybody who's ahead of them still at this point. And they beat the Islanders and the Caps by a score of 13-4 over 3 games in the last week. These are the teams they are competing with. So they have to be the top-ranked team in that division, and they're quickly moving up this list back to being one of the top teams in the entire NHL.
Now, Rory is the resident fantasy contributor for Sportsnet and Sportsnet.ca. If there's one thing I hit on this year, it was calling out Alex Nedeljkovic the next Jordan Binnington, so I'm happy about that. You talk about 3-headed monsters in between the pipes. I have no clue who Carolina starts in Game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. I do know they're a really good hockey team, aren't they?
Really, really good. I mean, the one area of concern for this team before was goaltending, and that is just no longer the fact. They have the best 5-on-5 save percentage in the NHL this season, and it's amazing that when something happens, like Peter Mrazek gets hurt late, and you have to scratch him in a game like you did on Thursday, well, you can just put Alex Nedeljkovic back in there, and he saves 32 of 34 shots, and you come away with a win, right? I mean, now you have depth there. I mean, Nedeljkovic isn't going to win the Calder, but he should be considered for that 3rd spot. I think he's making a lot of good performances worthy of being in that kind of consideration. But now you have 3 deep. You have options with what you can do. It's probably between Mrazek and Nedeljkovic for a Game 1 start. You're not going to turn to Reimer unless you absolutely have to and something unforeseen happens. But now this is not an area of concern anymore. We've said all we need to say about the strength on their blue line. Over the last 1 or 2 years, the offense has started to come as Aho and Svechnikov have really started to explode as young players, and they found that too. So now that they've got the goaltending, full steam ahead for this team.
Carolina better get cracking on re-signing their head coach, if you know what I'm saying. As we move on to number 2, the top 2 teams that both clinch a playoff spot as we speak. Number 2, the Vegas Golden Knights.
So yeah, Vegas, again, like not a lot of weaknesses here. What's interesting is that they're 2-3-1 against the Minnesota Wild this season and have lost their last 4 games against that team that they've played. So you wonder, is getting the first seed in that division more important for Vegas than maybe we realize? Maybe it's just a matchup thing. Yeah. But still, like, no great concerns here. You talked about you're not sure who the Game 1 starter is going to be for Carolina in the playoffs. Who's the Game 1 starter for Vegas? I mean, it feels like that was decided last year when Robin Lehner took over and you had the sword in the back incident with Alan Walsh, right? But Lehner missed some time. Marc-Andre Fleury has yet another resurgent season, just an amazing year for him. And now they're switching starts back and forth. Who's going to be the Game 1 starter, and how is that dynamic going to be in these playoffs? That's something to watch for this team down the stretch.
I would go to 5th string Dylan Ferguson, quite frankly. Number 1, last but not least, shout out to producer Drew, the Colorado Avalanche.
Yeah, I think teams actually have a winning record in their first game back from COVID-related pauses this year, so not a surprise that the Avs come back and get a W themselves against the St. Louis Blues. What else can you say about this team? We've talked about them not having any weaknesses. We've talked about Nathan MacKinnon and our appreciation for him as one of the best players in the league, but how this team is not just that top line either. There's a lot of forward depth here too. So this week, let's just shine some light on the defense here and give some appreciation to these guys. A really dynamic and young defense, a little bit of toughness back there too. But how the heck did this team get Devon Toews for 2 second-round picks? Between him, Sam Girard, another guy that they got in a huge win of a trade a couple years back, Cale Makar. I mean, just a wild team everywhere. Just have to really nail home that this team is more than McKinnon in that top line. And just to note that Devin Dubnyk has been 2-0 with a 918 save percentage since coming over in the deadline, having to step in with Philip Grubauer on the COVID list there. You see how he's going to play down the stretch. But just wanted to mention, on top of everything with this team, that defense, certainly one of the top units in the entire league.
I don't know, I just got this sneaky feeling they're liable to an upset here, especially if Philip Grubauer is not in the lineup. You just never know. Look at Tampa the last couple of years. I'm just throwing it out there. Speaking of throwing it out there, You can converse a bit about Dallas, who you want to give a special mention to, and I've got to pick up on a team you missed out on completely, and that's the Pittsburgh Penguins. Two statistics. I'm Sammy Stats on today's show. 25-9-2 since hiring, I should say, Ron Hextall and Brian Burke, and 12-5-2 since Evgeny Malkin went down. They got Kapanen back on Thursday. Malkin's close. I still wonder about their goaltending, but I do think that team's legitimate, Roy.
I mean, I do too. The problem I had with ranking them on here is when it comes to the playoffs, which teams in that division are you choosing Pittsburgh can beat? Yeah. Do you think Pittsburgh can beat the Islanders? Do you think Pittsburgh can beat Washington? Do you think Pittsburgh can beat a Boston team that is now finding itself? That's all going to be really, really tough. And having four teams from that one division in here was tough. Didn't want to squeeze out Minnesota. Didn't want to squeeze out Florida. It's just hard to get this team into there. Honestly, I had Dallas ranked ahead of Pittsburgh this week because, I mean, it was hard. I couldn't put Dallas in the top 10 because of the loss to Detroit there on Thursday. They won that game.
Heart winner, by the way.
Who's Dallas's heart?
Yeah. Who's their MVP for the season? It's a trick question. You know who it is. Anyways, go on.
I don't know if I know who it is. I think it's
Jason Robertson.
Is it Jason Robertson? It might be, but I think there's a couple of guys because that's another team that is good for a wide variety of reasons. I think Rope Hintz could be in the running for that team MVP because that's a season that has also really flown under the radar. But so the reason why I have Dallas ahead of Pittsburgh is because we know this team is built on their defense, and that's what got them to the Stanley Cup final last year. But now with Hintz and now with Robertson scoring goals, you're going to get Tyler Seguin back too. Yes. And they are really winning a lot of games here and making this late charge for the playoffs that we kind of had in the back of our minds and wondering if they were going to be able to do. They're doing it now, and it looks like they have the inside track for that fourth seed. So, I mean, they could hit the playoffs peaking at the right moment. So do not write off the Dallas Stars anymore.
Yeah, it's a big-time wild card. Tyler Seguin on the men. You just never know, and certainly could see a rematch of the Stanley Cup final in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, if you can believe it. Thanks so much for this, Roy.
See you next week, Nick.
All right, that's Roy Boylan. I'm Nick Alberga. This has been another edition of Sportsnet's NHL Power Rankings.